Hello and welcome to our webinar looking at tips for home working. My name is Stuart Entwistle. I'm Training Manager for Osmond Ergonomics. During the course of this webinar, I'll give a brief introduction to Osmond Ergonomics and myself. Then we'll look at the risks from working at home and then look at how we should have ourselves set up on our chairs, organising the rest of the equipment on top of our desk, and then also look at aspects of wellbeing and mental health, and then free resources at the end of the webinar for further support. So I've been with the business now for over 19 years. I started assessing or became an advanced DSE assessor in 2005 and still carry out many assessments day to day. As I think that sort of gives me, that's my learning curve, as you could say. In 2013, developed the role of training manager and deliver external training like one-day DSE assessor courses, postural awareness courses, but also look after our internal training program as well. So at Osmond Ergonomics, we provide products and services to improve wellbeing and productivity within the workplace. We're based just outside of Wimborne in Dorset, but we have a national coverage. If you need to speak to any of my colleagues, then we're all advanced DSE assessors, and we've all done a 3-day ergonomics in practice course. We have regular internal training days, and it's not just about the next product that's coming to market, but actually we take a more holistic approach to that. So we've done dyslexia awareness, we've looked at mental health, we've mindfulness, we've done advanced driving, the list goes on. So quite a varied training program that we run within the business. So we look at actually the content for the webinar now. So tips for home working. So there's two areas we need to sort of look at, and that's the physical, so aspects that affect the body, and then psychological, those aspects that affect the mind and our mental health. So musculoskeletal disorders, they're the obvious and most common one that I think we sort of experience or see colleagues with day to day. And that's those aches and pains in our body that sort of distract us, that affect our ability to carry out the work that we need to do. Now that could be due to lack of proper space or proper setup of where you're working. So, it could be you're tempted to use the sofa with the laptop on your lap. We've combined that with lack of movement. I'm sure those aches and pains will soon start to creep in, if not on the first day, quite soon, on subsequent days. So we need to sort of be aware of that when we're tempted to sit in bed or tempted to work from the sofa. We also have eye fatigue as well. Now, staring at a screen for long periods of time can create fatigue in the eyes. So we just stare at the screen, our blink rate reduces. Our eyes start to dehydrate. Now, our eyes stay healthy by looking at different visual points and by regularly blinking. As we blink, the tear ducts release small amounts of fluid, which keeps our eyes hydrated. Now, when we reduce that blink rate from staring at the screen for long periods of time, then our eyes start to become even more fatigued. So what we have to do is make sure that we look away at things regularly. So generally, I'd advise for 20 minutes of staring at the screen, we should be looking away at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. It gives the eyes a chance to rehydrate through increasing that blink rate. It allows the muscles to start working and relax. So we need to make sure that we don't stare at the screen for too long, because in some home working environments, there aren't that many distractions, whereas in an open plan office, we're often distracted. We look around, see what's going on, or colleagues come over and talk to us. So we have opportunities to look away from the screen, even though we're not realizing what we're doing. And then we have physical stress as well. Now, when we're physically stressed, we tend to tense up our muscles, our body, and we don't want to be like that. Our body is happiest when it's relaxed or when it's moving. It doesn't like to hold static postures, as we call it. And then we have the psychological aspects of working at home. So, we are social people. So from working from home can make us feel quite isolated, create that sort of feeling of loneliness. So that then sort of can lead into anxiety, stress, because we feel that we're not members of a team. We're on our own here. Sometimes it could be through lack of direction from management, feeling as though we're sort of not in control of our daily work because we haven't been given that direction. And then also there could be distractions in some homes. There could be children. There could be partners, wives, husbands who are working as well. So there could be distractions, and all of those end up sort of then having an effect on sort of your feeling of productivity as well. So you then start to feel anxious. You can then start to feel stressed, isolation, loneliness, lack of support, lack of sort of fresh air, going out and getting exercise, and that can also lead into depression as well. And then once you get into these states of anxiety or maybe low moods, then you tend to retract into yourself. You become more introverted, which then sort of takes you back to that loneliness and isolation. So if it's not sort of realized soon in its early stages, then you can end up in that catch-22 and just making the situation worse. So we need to sort of be aware of those areas. So why do we need to look after our posture? And let's look at things and try and sort of make things a bit more positive. So studies show that, we don't spend enough time moving around. Mother Nature designed us to be stood up and walking around, and we're not designed to maintain long periods of being seated or long periods of just standing still in one position. And there's lots of studies online that would suggest we can spend sort of anywhere between 19 and 14 hours of our waking day seated. And you probably think, and that's during a normal office day when we go into the office. If we end up working at home, then we haven't got that commute into work where we may end up doing a small amount of steps into work, to the public transport, to the car, from the office, from the car park to the office. We don't have that movement. So the amount of time we spend seated is probably even worse when we're working at home. But, if you think about that commute in public transport in a vehicle, we're sat down. We go straight to our office, our desk, and we sit down. We don't get up as much as we should do during the day. Quite a lot of people I come into contact with still spend their lunch times at their desk. We repeat that morning cycle for the afternoon. We sit down in public transport or in a car, and we go home. We sit down for the family meal, and then we probably unwind in front of the TV, which is sat down. So you can sort of see where we spend how we spend a lot of our time seated. Considering Mother Nature designed us to be moving, then we're doing the wrong thing. So we need to make sure that we move regularly. Now, these problems that I see as an assessor, they build up over time. Sometimes there aren't any warning signs until it's too late. Quite often people will say to me when I'm asking them why I'm there, they will say, well, actually, I dropped a pen, I dropped a bit of paper on the floor, I bent over to pick it up and my back went. And they will blame that picking up the pen or the bit of paper as the trigger that broke, the straw that broke the camel's back, but actually it's been building up over time, and that was just the trigger to create that awareness. But unfortunately, once you're aware of that pain, it takes a long time to recover, to heal, and you have to maintain those good habits to help with the recovery. You have to put those in place for a long period of time. Otherwise, if you revert back to your bad habits, then that pain soon sort of comes back into focus again. So that's a cost to us. That has an effect on our lives, how we operate, how we play with our children, our grandchildren, nieces, nephews, going driving, shopping, DIY, gardening. It has an effect on us because it stops us from doing some of those things. But then it also has an effect on business as well, because if we're not being as productive, because we're being distracted by these aches and pains, these problems, then our employer isn't getting as much out of us as they could be. And also, if we end up leaving it so it becomes too much of a problem, then we end up being off sick. So then that is a real cost to business in terms of having to find someone to cover an individual's role or anything like that. So there are big costs to this. So if we just take small changes in our lifestyle at work, then we can improve all of this. So before starting, we need to decide where to work. It's tempting to look at the sofa or the bed and think, oh, I could work there. But actually, they are very bad for your posture over a long period of time. If you need to use something like a sofa, then you need to be moving more regularly. So every 15, 20 minutes, getting up and moving, I would say. Um, but we need to look at, my advice would be to try and look at replicating your office setup. So if you've got a table you can sit at, you have a basic computer chair, then use that and try and get things set up as you would in the office, because you'll be a lot more comfortable. And then also try and position yourself, if possible, again, away from distractions. If you have someone else in the house who could be working, may have children running around the house, we need to make sure that we keep ourselves away from too many distractions. Otherwise, it can lead into some of those issues that I mentioned on the previous slide. We need to make sure when we're positioning our equipment, where possible, try and get ourselves right angled to windows, because otherwise we end up increasing that fatigue on the eyes. With facing a window, we have bright light coming in, and the eyes want to, or the pupils want to contract to reduce that light coming into the eyes, but we're looking at what is effectively quite a dim screen. So the pupils want to expand to try and let some of that light in so we can see the screen properly that we're working on. But when we have the sunlight coming through and the dim screen, the eyes struggle to sort of find that balance. So it can exacerbate that eye fatigue that we have. But then also, if on the other flip side, if you're in a spare room, then they can quite often be quite dimly lit because they're not always used every day. So get a task lamp, a desk lamp or something to put on the desk, on the table, so that it can brighten up the work area that you're using and help to relax the eyes and reduce some of that fatigue. Now, when it comes to sitting, a lot of people I come across think that sitting's okay for the body, but the problem is that when we're seated, we change the shape of the spine, we change the pressures on the spine, and actually sitting can put more pressure on our spine than standing. So it's not as healthy for us to do as we think it is. Now there's things we can do to improve our postures when we're seated, because if we end up sitting too low or too far away from the desk, then we end up leaning forward. We put a lot of weight through the upper limbs into the shoulders, and that creates static muscle load in the shoulders and the upper body. Our head may be leant forward, and I don't know whether you realise, those of you listening, that our head is about 5 to 6 kilos in weight. When we lean forward, we increase that effective weight. So there's information online that suggests that for every 4 inches of forward movement we do with our head when we're seated, we then we quadruple the weight of our head. So in effect, the neck and the spine and the upper body is trying to support around 20-25 kilos of weight. And that's why, if for any of you who experience any discomfort in the neck, why you may be able to think back to things that you've been doing recently, maybe looking at a smartphone in your lap, maybe using the laptop on your lap. Those sort of postures just increase that fatigue in the neck and down through the spine. So something to just be aware of. We want to try and avoid hooking our feet around underneath the chairs, because then that reduces blood circulation around the legs and up around the rest of the body. So all of these things just have an effect, a tiring effect, a fatiguing effect on the body, and can lead to periods of discomfort even after you've stopped working. So how do we want to have our chair set up? Well, what we want to do is make sure that we're sat in close to the desk and we sit back on the seat so we have our back relaxed. If you have an adjustable chair, then try and adjust the angle so we are slightly reclined in the chair, because then that means the backrest will take some of that loading off of our upper body. And we want to raise the chair so that when we're seated, our elbows should just be above the working height of the desk, so that when our forearms are horizontal to the ground, our hands just naturally rest on top of the keyboard. That way we keep our upper body, our shoulders nice and relaxed. If the chair isn't adjustable, then what I would suggest is putting some cushions on the base of the chair just to raise you up a little bit. Maybe a cushion in the small of the back to give some additional lower back support. And then if you find that your feet don't quite touch the floor, then maybe you can put a book on the floor or maybe a box, just so that you're not having your legs pulling on the lower back and that your feet are supported. We need to make sure that we arrange our desktop so that we make effective use of the space we have and we don't compromise that good sitting posture that we've just achieved. So what we want to do is make sure that we have the items we're going to use frequently during the day as close to us as possible. So typically keyboard and mouse, they want to be directly in front of us towards the front edge of the desk, leaving a little space between the front edge of the desk and the front edge of the keyboard so that we can rest our hands down when we pause from typing. And we want to make sure that the mouse is close to the keyboard as well to stop any shoulder abduction when using the mouse. We want to make sure the screen is directly in front of us. So what we're doing is we're enabling us to be able to sit in a straight line and see and use the keyboard and mouse and see the screen effectively without compromising or twisting our body. If you're going to be using any documents, then what I would suggest is you place those just behind the keyboard and in front of the monitor. So again, when you're referring to those documents, everything is in line of sight. Now, screen height, if that's too low, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, then we're going to put a lot of strain on the neck. So we need to make sure that we address the screen height. So we want to make sure that we raise the screen so that when we're looking straight ahead, the visible part of the screen should just be below eye level. That way we can then keep our neck in a more neutral posture, and we're not going to be nodding the head so much if we have to look at the keyboard as well. The monitor wants to be placed about an arm's length away, because if it's too far away from us, then we'll just end up leaning forward because we can't see the screen. And if it's too close to us, then we'll end up putting strain on the eyes from the screen being too big. If you're using a laptop, then ideally you should be using a laptop stand to put the laptop on to raise the screen up, and then plugging in a separate keyboard and mouse. If you haven't got a laptop stand, then again, or you haven't got a monitor stand, then use a couple of books or a box to get your screen to a better height to enable you to sit back more. So when it comes to well-being and mental health, I find you want to try and keep to a normal routine. So if you end up getting up at, say, 6:30, so that you could be in the office for 8:30, for example, then maybe give yourself the satisfaction of having a short line, but don't roll out of bed and then fall into your workstation and start working. Try and keep to normal times. Make sure that you start the day and finish the day at fixed times, or you do the hours that you're paid to do, and don't end up creeping into your own time, because otherwise you end up with a distorted work-life balance. There will be no differentiation between work time and home time. Switch devices off at the end of the day, or at least switch your emails off, so that then in your mind you have cleared from work and you're now at during your personal time. I find it easy to or helpful to create a to-do list at the start of the day, so you know what you're going to get through, or maybe at the end of the day create a to-do list for the following day. So then once you start working, then you're straight into your work, and then least distractions, feel more productive. Making sure you take regular breaks is important. Now, generally, I would advise that for every hour of being seated, we want to stand up and have a quick walk around for a few minutes, take a few stretches. But I'd probably say at home, try and do that more regularly if possible, because we haven't got all that other exercise that we do, just walking down corridors, walking through car parks, all those sort of things. So I would look at taking more regular breaks, maybe every half an hour. Look at keeping a window open where you're working to keep fresh air coming in. And then also go for a walk, maybe during your lunch break. Go for a walk around the block, 10-15 minutes, just to get some fresh air, get the muscles working, refresh the mind. Especially useful if you're stuck on a project and you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. Go outside, go for a walk for 10-15 minutes, come back, and you'll feel refreshed and ready to start it again. Standing whilst making telephone calls or maybe video calls. Move around whenever possible, because as I mentioned, we are designed to be moving, and that's a key to reducing that fatigue and maintaining that productivity. It's also an idea to keep in regular contact with colleagues to reduce those feelings of isolations. Use those video calls to speak to colleagues. Set up virtual coffee breaks. So if you have a team, then Members of staff who go for coffee breaks at the same time agree to set a time to have a conference call or a video call. So then you can all have your breaks together. It makes you feel as though you're still part of that team and you can share sort of work jokes, things going on. So it helps just to settle the mind. But if you do feel isolated or anxious at any time, then speak to your manager, see what support there is that they can offer, or maybe contact your employer's Employee Assistance Program or EAP to see if there's any support that can be provided through them. In terms of other resources that are available, we have PDF versions of our posture guidance, stretching, agile working information, which can be downloaded from the link. They're free to use. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out on the second Wednesday of every month. And you can see archived editions, or you can subscribe to it from the link there. And lots of updates on home working and agile working as well through those. We have company social media accounts on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. We're trawling the internet trying to find relevant articles on ergonomics, health, safety, well-being. So to keep up with sort of the latest trends, thinkings, then have a look on LinkedIn for our company page, or Twitter or Facebook. So when working at home, some other, so Fitback Physiotherapy, they have a 7-minute exercise routine to try and help to sort of keep you limber, to help strengthen your back. So from the link there, you can find the video to that. Cardinus Risk Management, they have an app which can be found on iTunes or the Apple Store, and just search healthy working, and within that there is guidance and tips and advice for good postures, for how to set your equipment up, and it's free to download. And then if you are feeling isolated or anxious, then how about taking a look at some charities like Action for Happiness? They have a lot of stuff and a lot of support on their website, or charities like Mind, where they can offer support, and there's lots of information on their website for further resource and further help as well. Right, I hope that's been of help. My email address is on screen now, so if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, then by all means drop me an email. Customer service number and email address is further on down the screens. So any further questions, anything you think we can help with, then please get in contact. Okay, many thanks for listening.